is. Tell me if that does anything
Yeah,
different.
yeah, it looks like it's being live streamed. So, sorry everyone that's just coming in now. We just figured out the live stream. This is our first time, but I think that we're ready to go. So I'll let you go get back to what you're doing. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go through. Let me get back to what I was talking about now. So in this case, in what we're looking at here is now I can go and get two properties, right? And maybe I'm into each of those. Even if I said I was into each of these for 40, maybe I bought them for 15, 20, and I'm putting that much into them. And so maybe I bought for 15 and I'm putting 20 into this one. Bought this one for 20 and put 20 into it, whatever that might be, right? Those numbers. Now I got two rental properties. And if they're each worth about 120, I'm just going to stick with that number. On average, I'm getting an average of $1,200 a month. I realize some I might be getting 900, some I might be getting 1,600, 1,700, but we'll just say an average of 1,200 bucks a month. Well, now I've got two rentals that I used the equity from the property and I got my original money back plus the equity from the property. And now I can go get at least two more, and if maybe I'll even potentially, if I got good enough deals, I could get three more. Let's just say in this case, you got two more. Well, now, once I've got 3 months of rent rolls, what can I do it again? I can rinse and repeat the same process again. Pull out 80,000 here, 80,000 here, and now I've got 160K. And instead of course, instead of 1,200 bucks a month on each of these, right? Instead of 1,200, I'm getting 600 a month times two now. So I'm getting $1,200 a month here. Plus, I'm getting $600 a month on the original. So I'm still cash flowing $1,800 a month. And now I have $160,000 cash. So what do you think if I'm trying to build a portfolio? What do you think I'm going to do again? I can rinse and repeat that same process and do the same thing again. And then this time, maybe we actually get four, potentially even, let's say we got five properties here. And do you guys see, hopefully you can see, like, this is a strategy where the only capital you had to put in was the original 35,000. And even if you didn't have all of that, you could actually have just, as long as you had the money to buy the property at the auction, you could potentially get a loan for the rest on the construction loan if you wanted. But now, as we start rinsing and repeating again, it's the same exact scenario. It's just times five, right? So when I look at, you know, when I look at once I do the same thing, now I'm getting, oh, there it goes. Now I'm getting 80, 80, 80, 80, and $80,000 here. Let's say they're each worth 120 on average. I'm getting $1,200 a month. Okay, 120, 120. And then you're getting $1,200 a month in rent. Well, of course, that's going to get cut in half. It's a 600 with new loan. Now I have a 600 on mortgage payment. But now instead of 600 times one, two, you're getting 600 times five in this case. So you're essentially getting still 3,000 a month from these properties here in cash flow. But now you've got 80 times five, right? So essentially now you've got 400,000 to go into the next group with. So it doesn't take too many of these cycles, you guys, and you could be substantially, significantly changing a lot of things. Because now, if I do one more cycle, right? Oops, it's going to highlighter. Now I'm going to get 10 properties, 10 more properties, rather than draw all these, you know. And at this point, if I'm getting $1,200 a month in cash flow times 10, I'm getting 12K a month in cash flow here. Even if you stop there, right? If you stop there, essentially, oh my gosh, what is going on here? If you stopped here, you would still have one, two, three, eight. You'd have a total of 18 properties, and you would have 10 that are free and clear, have no mortgages on them, that are paid for, that you're getting $12,000 a month in cash flow. And you have eight other properties that are leveraged, but you're still getting what, $4,800 a month. So you're making about 18,000 a month in rental property if you stopped right there. If this was your new line, you said, okay, we're done. 18 grand a month is enough for me. I'm done. And the other eight properties are going to pay themselves off over time through making those mortgage payments. Now, if you decide to go one more time, right, you would end up with, instead of 12,000 a month, instead of 12,000 a month, you would end up with about 6,000 a month. So you'd still be over $10,000 a month cash flow, but you would essentially, if you pulled out money one more time, you'd pull out about $800,000 in cash. And the best part, you guys, is if I pull out that $800,000 in cash, that is a non-taxable event because it's not profits, it's a loan. And you don't get taxed on borrowed money. And so even though somebody else is making those loan payments for me, my tenants, I'm not getting taxed. So that $800,000 cash, I could technically do whatever I want with it. But you know what? Now if I went and bought a whole bunch more rentals, I might buy me 20 more rental properties. And now I have 20 properties that are free and clear at 20,000 a month, plus the other, what, 10,000, almost 11,000 a month that I'm currently making. Or that could be a great down payment on a multifamily, or apartment building. And so there's so many things that you can do with that make a big difference across the board. And that's one of the areas that I really love working on, is exactly that. Because you can grow a portfolio with very little capital. Another area that I really enjoy, which maybe on the next time I join you guys on podcast, I'll spend more time going over wholesaling. But I wanted to talk a little bit about fix and flips, because for me, fix and flips are one of my favorite areas that we're doing right now, because profits are so big. Because there's so many properties, you can come on a market and essentially undercut the market and sell your properties really fast, because there's so much profit in the deals. So, I'm going to show you some tax properties, some on market properties here, of things that you can do that we're currently doing. I'm going to even show you a couple properties that we have currently in rehab, but it can make such a big impact on not only what's possible, but what we're currently doing. So let me see here. Oh no. Hold on a second. Let me get this out of the way. This. Yeah, I'm gonna move over to this slide here. So here's one of the properties that the renovation is almost done. It's a property in Arkansas. Now, this particular property we bought, so I'm gonna go back to the top here. We bought this property for $1,718. Okay. So I'm not saying that everybody had, necessarily wants to take on this big of a rehab or extensive, but really we're only putting about 40,000 into it. Okay. And so most investors, they get worried, about certain things. In this case, this actually had, structurally, exteriorly, it was sound. So we felt great about bidding on it. We got it at a great price, so it was very little risk, right? And we bought, so we bought for 1,700, and because we're using we're very systemized in our approaches and renovations and how we do it, it's going to sell for about 140,000. And it's not necessarily from luck, not from a hot market, but from repeatable systems built exactly for that kind of a deal. So here's the actual house when we got it. That's what it looked like. So we bought it because the main house was secure. There was definitely some water issues with the in this carport area, so the roof in the carport area needs some work. I'll show you that here in a minute. And in this particular, property, a lot of people may have passed on it, maybe not. Now when we bought it, actually the windows were boarded up, so we couldn't really see in there. And it wasn't like a hidden gem. It wasn't like a simple renovation, but it's a very small property. It's about 1,200 square feet or 1,100 square feet. So no one else, raised their panel bought it. We got it at minimum bid. There was a little bit of fire damage in the kitchen, but it wasn't fire damage like there's holes in the roof. It wasn't, it definitely wasn't a tear down because it was secured, but that's what a lot of people may have thought, without doing further investigation. But because we did our research up front, we knew we were getting a good deal going in. And why we bought this, why others passed, the difference between, you know, comes down to preparation, right? We had tax deed expertise. We understood the title risk, redemption periods, and how to evaluate the process. We had automated due diligence, process pulling comps, really getting proper repair costs, and you know, and got rid of all the red flags before we bid on it. And then, and even so, with this, you guys, we bought this without ever actually going to the property. We bought it remotely. We had someone bid on our behalf. We bought this property remotely. And there's certain things and tools, and some of you guys on this training might have some of these tools, like the construction management software that we use, where we have every scope of work, vendor, dollars, everything's tracked. And that way we have real confidence in our renovation process before we get started. And for some of you guys, some of you might end up wanting to come along with us. We about 6 times a year we take a small group of people to an auction and then actually take them through a renovation in markets that we're actually doing deals in, where we already have the teams established that you can take advantage of. And so there's things like that we do from time to time, but we do that more on a qualification basis. We only let so many people come along with us to that. We want to make sure, we're most serious, but this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing. So, most investors and untrained, trained investors, they either make one or two mistakes. They assume that nothing needs to be done, or they minimize the construction, and they miss out on the details. And so you need to understand the distinction across between both of those scenarios. So what other investors saw was, hey, there could be a little bit of, the house is boarded up. It was in a remote location, which it really isn't. It's about an hour, Blytheville is about an hour outside of Memphis, Tennessee. So it's what we call a ripple market, as well as we had done our research and we know that there was a huge investment in distill plants there, about $2 billion recently. And so, housing needs are on the rise. We estimated maximum repairs, going into this. A lot of people say, hey, I don't have a local contractor or local relationships. I don't know how permitting works and all these things. There's always excuses, guys. There's always excuses not to do things. But we knew the structure was strong, the exterior structure was sound just based on the photos and the on-site inspection we had done beforehand. we got it so cheap that almost, you get a property that cheap for a couple grand, it's hard to lose on, right? And there's a strong demand in the area for property, especially renovated property. And so most of that was surface damage and other things. We did have to, change out some things, and I'll show you what happened. And a lot of times, as long as the structure is sound, properties can look worse than they actually are, and so again, we don't generally, we're not just going to jump on everything, but in some cases, like even in this case, we changed out the windows. We had to take out the sheetrock and do new sheetrocking and do a bunch of things, fix the roof repairs, but we were able to repair the roof instead of change the whole roof, trim things back, everything else that way. And when we look at it, you know, we're able to, avoid triggering some of unnecessary permit triggers, keep the project moving along. Fortunately, this isn't a market that has really, fairly low, you know, fairly easy to get permits done as well. So we had to clean out the interior just because there was a fire in there. You can't leave any of the sheetrock. Remove all the insulation, remove the drywall. We had to clean up the cabinets and the flooring, inspect everything. But at the end of the day, we are using, we're able to utilize low cost labor versus expensive labor. We're paying 15 to 25 bucks an hour instead of 860, $120 an hour for the demolition, trash removal, site debris, landscaping, prep, materials, all the major stuff we're able to do pretty cheaply. And some things we had to use a little bit of skilled trades, but most of it we're able to keep the construction costs down. So our total construction cost is about $40,000 on this deal. It's like 39,000 and some change. And then plus the $1,718 we spent on it, we're into about 42 grand, and it'll sell for 140. So after realtor fees and all the other stuff, we'll want to make about $85,000 on this deal. And then, utilizing our software, we're breaking down every scope of work, everything we're doing across the board, preventing, all that. That makes a big difference. And so, essentially, this is kind of what it looks like in numbers at the end of the day. And we're just about to pop this property on the market within the next 2 weeks, and we've only been renovating it for 3 weeks now. So a little bit longer than 4 weeks, about 40 days, 45 days start to finish. And we were able to get the materials, low cost label. We got electrical and plumbing done cheaply, and even replacing the HVAC in this case, as far as the condensers and things like that. Um, and then we just use our standardized kind of level one rehab, everything that we put into a level one rehab as far as the final interior finishes. Okay. So when we look at that, you know, when I look at a scenario like that, this is actually, let me show you, see if I can pull up some of that renovation. So, hold on, let's just bring back up 1 second here. So I'll actually see if I can share some of these things with you, just so you guys can see what's going on. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. So this is that the house is actually on Main Street. So here's how it looks when we got it, right? The interior, it looks worse than it is though, oftentimes. So there was some of the fire damage areas up here in that kind of top area. You could see where we had to look at some things there. This is as we cleared it out. And once it was cleared out, there was a few boards, few things being replaced, wherever there's anything burnt. Here, if you guys can see some of this, we had to take out even in a couple areas, a little bit of flooring. Okay, so in a lot of ways, this was kind of a gut job. It was just such a small house. It didn't take that much to fix it. And then once we cleaned it up, here's where it started looking like this, right? And then we started putting it back together. So now it's all opened up. There was some problems with the roof. We've got the roof repairs done, as far as the carport and some of those areas. Here, this is the final repair on it. And then here's where it was at sheetrock. That's interesting to you guys. So now it's all cleaned up, everything's coming back together. As you can see there. And here's the roof before and after it was rehabbed. So there was some roof issues, but the whole roof wasn't bad. So we're able to go and clear that out, fix that, and repair that without necessarily have to change the entire roof. There's our construction crew on it. And we actually placed a lot of the windows and everything else as well. So all in all, this is gonna be a really nice house for the next buyer. Here's some of the new windows, new things on it. Here's when it got to tape and float, right? As far as now it's getting to the final stages. So next week they're putting the cabinets and finish work in, and it's pretty much gonna be all done. So, and we're able to get through it because it's a small rehab very quickly. So there's the new water heater, new things we're putting in there across the board. So when we talk about renovations, that that that's going to take us a total of about 6 weeks start to finish before it's back on the market. And if you're prepared going in, we bought it, then immediately we can start getting an inspection done, get contractors out there and get things moving. You could get in and out of these properties fairly quickly, especially now. The one thing I will say with construction rehabs is you want to do it during the time frame that, during the time that, you want to be doing your quiet title while you're getting the renovations done. Here's another project that was a bigger rehab. So this is a much bigger house, 3,000 square feet. And here's what we're doing on that one right now. So this one, actually we had to get licensed, brand new electrical throughout the whole house. We had to clean out one of the back rooms. There's actually the main structure of the house, but someone had done an addition where the roof was coming in a little bit and there's a hole in the roof. But overall, the main structure was very sound. Now it looked terrible. Like I actually, this is one of the rare cases where I actually went out to check on it. So a total about 13 rehabs that were going on out there. Plus we're prepping for the upcoming Arkansas auctions. So I actually went out there to this property, and it had a dead possum in it and all kinds of fun stuff. And it looked terrible when you look at it. I mean, when you look at it initially, this was the area where there was a water damage in the back corner, and that looks terrible, but it's not necessarily always as costly as you think it is. Here's after we came in and started, fixing that, right? Where that one, there's one room, there was only one room in the whole house that had any issues. The whole rest of the house was completely sound as far as water issues, anything else. So it definitely needed still renovation, but you see this back corner of this addition here, that's the area that needed a full, some full fixing. But this house we got for $20,000, and you can see for too long, look at it, which looks like brand new, right? Back to how it should have been, as they're changing the roof out on it, fixing everything up on it. Okay, now once it's done, obviously it looks a lot better than it did, and matches the current roof, new electrical through the whole house all the way out, everything else. So Right now, they just finished up the inspections on the electrical because it did need brand new electrical in the house. Was required by the city on this one. And that's ran across the board. So, but the rest of the house is in really good shape. And now you can see they've already started replacing some of the windows, sheetrock, everything else, is getting cleaned up. I don't know why that picture looked weird. But this one's moving right along. This is another one that'll be on the market probably 1st of September. And we bought it for 20,000, putting about 80,000 in renovation into it. And it'll sell on the market for about $350,000. So my question to you guys is how many of those do you need to do a year to really be doing a little bit better, right? And if you're doing, a couple of those deals a year, you're making an extra two, three, 400, $500,000 a year. If you took those funds and put it into rental properties, like some of the things I was just showing you with the rentals, could some of these properties have been rental properties? Sure. In this case, we're mostly flipping the properties because the market has such a demand for renovated properties right now that they're moving so fast. But could I have turned them into rentals? Sure. The numbers would have worked really well, especially on some of the smaller properties for rentals. Some of the properties we're only into for 5, 6 grand, put 15 into it, even for 20 grand, even if you're getting $1,000 a month, that's 12,000 a year on a $20,000 investment. And those properties are worth about 100 grand, 120 grand after they're done. So it's really close to the scenario that I just went through with you guys on rentals. But if you had an extra, 200, 300 grand coming in from fix and flips, and then you take all that money and you buy up 5, 6 rentals a year, what happens over you do that over 3, 4, 5 years? And right now we're seeing an opportunity in the marketplace we haven't seen. There's a lot less competition at tax auctions this year than we've seen before. In the previous last 6, 7 years, and so there's a lot of good stuff going on. And I'm gonna turn it back over to Steve and Shade here in just a second. Um, and we can talk about some other things. I do see a good question that just popped up. Do we also pick up tax sale land deals? Definitely. You can definitely pick up land. On average, you get land for like 10 cents on the dollar. The thing with land, the target right now is you buy it cheap and sell it cheap. Because there's so many properties coming on the markets and all the markets has softened a little bit. Land also softens quite a bit. So if you want to move it fast, you got to sell it cheap. So we want to buy it for 10 cents on the dollar, sell it for 30 cents on the dollar to somebody else. Either way, you're still doubling your money. So it's a great deal. But yeah, I mean, some of the biggest land deals. I mean, I know we've got one property in Michigan we picked up for about a piece of commercial land for 27K and taxes value on it's over $500,000. So there's lots of definitely land deals out there that make sense. And we've got tons and tons on our membership site and on our website. We've got tons and tons of examples of land deals across the board. So whether it's land or structures, I'll buy anything that's a deal. The reason why I like working on structures right now is it's cheaper to repair properties than it is to build new ones too. And typically with land, I wouldn't tell anyone to hold on to land right now. I'd just tell you to buy it cheap, sell it cheap, get rid of it, generate some capital, build it up. Once you have enough capital, right, or you've got a good enough passive income, then if you want to buy and hold land for long term, you could definitely look at doing that too. So I think Steve and Shane are going to come back on here. Oh, there he is. Hey guys, and then
Hey,
I'll come back on. The last 20 minutes or so, we can just really open up a Q&A, open forum, or 30 minutes. What do you guys prefer?
oh, you're muted, Steve.
I am muted. Yeah, 35 minutes,
Okay,
40 minutes,
cool.
something like that.
Well, I'll be back in the chat. You guys, I did put out the link one more time. If you want to schedule a time to sit down and really figure out what strategies you should be focused on and what your action plan should be, make sure to use the link in the chat, schedule a time with one of our real estate experts to really sit down with you and figure out what can you do in the next 12 months to significantly impact your finances and get you on track for your goals. Okay. So I also did mention some of the 3 days we had coming up and some of those things, and we talked a little, some of that stuff too. So, but anyway, Steve and Shade, the floor is yours.
Awesome. We appreciate it, Tom. It was kind of interesting to go through some of those properties that me and Shade had researched, and then to go out there and purchase them and then see the rehab being done on them. It's always interesting to find out, exactly what the condition is, because in that case, we do have to judge the book by the cover. And so that's the reason it was important. In fact, on that house that Tom showed you that we picked up for $1,700, that one we said we'd only pay, $3,000 for, because we knew that it had issues that were going to needed. But once we got into it, the issues really weren't as bad as we thought, and we really didn't think we'd win it that cheap. I think I put 2,000, 3,000, something like that, and ended up winning it for $1,700. It wasn't on our premium list, but it actually ends up being a great deal that can make us at least $80,000 on it.
Yeah, there are lots of interesting properties like that. We don't always end up acquiring the properties that we're going after, or at least the ones that are the top ones on our list. Sometimes those ones are more aggressively bid, but that's also why we target a variety of properties that we're looking at. In those cases, yeah, we can't get on the inside of the property, and so you're limited as to how much you can really figure out about the property from the outside, which is one of those reasons why we love states like Michigan and New York that provide us with more information, that help us make decisions. There's more states that are doing it too. I think more states are catching on to the fact that if they provide more information, that they can attract more buyers and online. And so we've seen a lot of growth with that. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool looking through the properties as well. Pretty neat to see their progress and to see them getting close.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. It's exciting. We want you guys to be doing it. And like Tom mentioned, if you'd like to learn, see if this strategy is right for you, go ahead and sign up for a strategy call. Either way, you're going to get pointed in the right direction. And then also, like you mentioned, we're going to be holding some 3-day events. And so for our members, we give you a special discounted price. In fact, we're going to be raising that price next week, even for our membership. So if you're interested, let us know, and we can get you in that $299 membership price. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a couple of different things. We're going to talk about the best tax lien auctions we think that are coming up over the next 30 days. We're going to talk about the best tax deed auctions over the next 30 days. And then we're going to go look at Michigan. We talked about Michigan in a pre-auction, a pre-sale review a couple of weeks ago. And now we're going to go back and look at some of the properties that sold in Michigan and kind of get an idea of where the market's at.
Tax lien opportunities are kind of interesting because they exist all over the country, but there's also online opportunities that exist. And these are all online auctions that we're looking at right here. But chances are you may live in an area that uses tax liens or near or close to a state that does. Here are 5 different tax lien auctions that are happening in August here that are good sales, worth pursuing here. Clay County, Missouri, which we looked at that a little bit here, and some of the properties there. They've got some very valuable properties in that auction and a lot of stuff that looks pretty good. And then you could see all the different sales. I don't know how many sales were in Mississippi, at least 30 or 40, maybe even more. Oh, you're muted.
40, 45, something like that. There's quite a few auctions taking place, and I believe this is the second year that these Mississippi counties have moved over to online auctions. I think that some of them did it last year, but the bidding rates, seem to be pretty good because there's just not as much competition. There's nobody to, scram, scramming to go ahead and try to get into Mississippi tax sales. We see that in Florida. We'll see some of these areas where there's more competition. And so, like we mentioned earlier, if we can get a better interest rate return in another state on valuable pieces of property, we're okay with that. And if you don't mind waiting for a redemption period and you don't mind sitting on your money as long as you're earning a good interest rate. Some of these other states where you're going to get better rates or less competition are going to be good, and Mississippi is a good example. There's also, we just put one here, but there's a number of different New Jersey auctions that are opening up this month. I would probably say 20, maybe 10 to 20, something like that. And these are good opportunities in New Jersey using the real auction platform, which many of us have done online auctions, use that system, and understand that system.
Yeah, New Jersey is an interesting area because basically every major town or city holds their own tax auctions, and so there's tons of tax sales. They all have their own websites, at least many of them do on real auction, and so they are pretty easy sales to participate in, and they provide information there to make it easy to participate. So yeah, pretty good round of opportunities there. Tennessee, I know they just they're holding some sales here their on the properties that they're selling. I think they just wrapped that one up. But
Oh,
Lake County,
I have the wrong date on that.
oh, is
It's
it
the old date.
9/4?
I think it's like near the end of the month. We can go
Oh,
take a
okay.
look at it, but yeah, I think it's in a week or two.
Nice. Well, and that one's on Gubby's, which again, there are so many different auction platforms right now that you can probably get reduce competition by using some of these different services that have less competition in general, like Gubby's or Zeus Auctions is another one. Lake County, Indiana, is holding their tax lien sales. They're starting on the 4th of September, and they have 9,076 liens that are available. Just thousands and thousands of tax liens that are available. A lot of good opportunities there, to pick up some great liens here, very secure liens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we talk so much about tax deeds because we have so many of our students that are interested in acquiring property. And that's part of the reason why we talked about tax lien risk today, and also, talking about tax liens here is there's a lot of investors out there that don't want to take the time, the research, they're not interested in doing rehab, and they already have funds set up. So let's say that you have a self-directed account or something like that you'd like to turn over and move over into tax lien certificates. This is a way that you can do, just stage one due diligence, decide which tax liens that you're interested in. You don't have to worry about the on-site auctions, and you're still guaranteed a good interest rate return. And the thing about tax liens is even if it's a small percentage, if you buy enough tax liens, you're going to acquire property, except for in states, where it goes to a deed auction like Colorado or Florida, and when you do pick up the property, you could turn around and flip it for not, for 50 cents on the dollar, and you only paid, a small percentage because you just paid the back taxes to get it. You didn't have to bid up the price like you would in a tax deed auction.
Well, yeah, that's the real secret of tax liens is that if you buy enough liens, eventually you're going to acquire property. And when you acquire property, you're going to acquire it for pennies on the dollar. It's going to cost almost nothing compared to what to the profitability in it. And so, yeah, that's going to happen if you just buy enough liens here. It's bound to happen eventually. Now, like Steve was saying, we focus on tax deeds a lot, though, as well, because we have a lot of students that are trying to build their working capital, and tax deeds are probably the best vehicle to do that. There are a lot of great sales. So the first one being Ulster County, which we covered in the pre-sale list. You can see there were 160 or more, 180 properties total that are being offered, and there's probably at least 30 nice homes, in that auction. There's also many pieces of land there. We saw pieces of land there that didn't make any sense. And there's also pretty good opportunities there on some bigger pieces of land that do look pretty good and they have substantial value. So again, not all the properties in any of the auctions are going to be attractive. It's always going to be a matter of trying to weed out the good from the bad in every tax sale auction, I think. And that brings us to number 2, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which they started holding sales on bid for assets a little. I don't know if it was maybe last year or the year before that they started doing it, but they've got a number of recurring sales now, so that it's not even just an annual sale, but they've got regular sales happening for Pennsylvania on bid for assets with properties starting as little as $1,600. It's essentially like an over-the-counter sale with these properties that they're offering up at that low of a price.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Philadelphia is kind of unique, versus any other county within that state. And like Shade said, they actually hold these $1,600 auctions every single month. Really, they actually hold three different type of tax sales. They hold a tax lien foreclosure sales where essentially the law firm is foreclosing on the property and offering it up for the first time. So there's two different law firms that handle those sales, and they hold those auctions once a month. And then those two auctions, the properties that don't sell, get put into this $1,600 sale. So the opening bid on all of these properties, $1,600. We have a video that we looked at maybe 5-6 months ago, and we saw many good deals that had already been rehabbed, and that were essentially currently put back onto the market and made huge profit margins. There's also a number of different Pennsylvania upset sales taking place this month, with Fayette County being held on the 21st and 22nd on bid for assets. There's some other ones as well. And what the upset sale is they foreclose on the property and you acquire it. You acquire the property, but it hasn't gone through that judicial foreclosure, which means that if it does have mortgages or judgments, they could stick along with other types of government issued liens. So there is good opportunity in those upset sales. We just need to research them differently, almost like a bank sale. But there's some pretty good opportunity through the upset sale because those are the first time these properties are coming up for auction.
Yeah, in their first initial offering there's going to be some really good deals on properties, and not all of them are going to have outstanding obligations outside of that. Some may, and some may not. And so, yeah, good opportunities in the upset sales, and also very minimal competition. I would say there's probably less competition in some of the upset sales than almost any other auctions that we've watched. Polk County, Florida, also has a sale happening here on the 20th. They've got regular, consistent tax deed auctions happening every single month through Real Auction, and those are pretty simple sales to track and to conduct research on. Everything about the way that the Florida conducts their tax deed auctions is an example to the rest of the states on how to do it well and how to make it easy. But there's also Michigan tax sales that are happening. The sales started about a week and a half ago, and they're going through the rest of this month and into September. And there are some excellent deals here in the Michigan sales, which we love to participate in every year, just because they provide us with good information and it's a good online system. And on top of that, all the Michigan sales, or at least most of them, are conducted out of one website, which makes it a lot easier for us when it comes to finding the information, participating in the auctions. Rather than needing to go to a new place every time for each one of these, we can pretty well operate from the one website to participate.
Yeah, it makes a huge advantage. In fact, we're going to be talking about Michigan today. In fact, one thing that we mentioned is that when we look at the Michigan auctions, sometimes the first part of the auctions end up getting some more competition. And so when I was going through and looking for sold results, I looked at the first two sales, and we've got some good examples to look at. But as I looked at even the more recent sales, some of those investors that were gung-ho there in the beginning spent up their money. And so as the auction keep going on throughout the month, that's usually when we actually see some of the very best deals come up and that are purchased. In fact, that's the same thing that we do at the auction. If there's a property that we can pick up for a good price in the beginning of the auction, we're going to go ahead and do that. But I would say that probably 70-80% of our deals end up in the last half of the auction, where people have already kind of got out of the high bidding there in the beginning. People have already spent some of their money, and so we'll always wait. We'll never leave the end of the auction, because those are usually when the best deals are going to be taking place. And that doesn't matter if it's an on-site auction or an online auction. If somebody only has so much money and they spend it in the early part of the auction, that means there's going to be less competition later on.
Yeah, which it is true that with every sale, even sales that are just going to last for a day, the sales in the second half of the day are always going to be more profitable than the ones in the first half of the day. Competition does end up kind of using up their money and spending it up and leaving more opportunities here as the day progresses. Michigan tax deeds, though, what we're going to be looking at are some of their the sales here in August that just occurred. Michigan is a tax deed state, So what that really means is that state law sets a redemption period for property owners. And at the end of that redemption period, counties have the power to foreclose on those properties and offer them up for auction. So that's essentially what's happening in Michigan is the counties are waiting out the redemption period there to foreclose on these properties so that they can offer them up at auction to the highest bidder, using a premium bidding system. But part of state law also requires them to have signs in front of the property with a picture as well. And that has kind of evolved into them also providing us with descriptions of the property and even interior images of a lot of the properties as well. And so, again, probably some of the best information we get out of any of the states, from any of the states here in the country. And as I was saying, the majority of these are on one website, which is tax-sale.info. Now, I guess I don't think this is actually a state-owned website, but they do happen to conduct the auctions for most of the counties in Michigan. There's only a couple of counties that aren't using this website, which it's handy for us. It makes it easier for us because it means we can go to that site, to tax-sale.info, for all the sales almost across the state.
Yeah, in fact, it was kind of interesting. There was one auction that wasn't held. There was 3 auctions, I think, total that don't use tax-sale.info. And one of them was holding an online auction, and the other 2 were holding on-site auctions. And last week during our coaching call, where we meet with our coaching students, we were looking at some of the results of that sale and saw some great properties. I can't remember if it sold for like 30,000, was worth 180, something like that.
Yeah, it was Lenawee County in Michigan was the one that did it on its own, and they actually had several really nice homes there that sold for just dirt cheap. Yeah, there was one that we saw a house there that sold for 40,000 that was valued at 180. And there's another deal right after that one that I have to pull up here. Several really good deals. So and what we noticed about those properties is they didn't bid up very high. They sold for a little over the opening bid amounts, but it was obviously there was a limited amount of competition there.
Yeah. So can you see my screen okay, Shade? I can't see for some reason.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some Michigan auctions, and kind of like I talked about before, I kind of wish I would have looked at some of these later sales, because there was even some better deals within there. But we'll go ahead and look at what some of the ones that we pulled up. As we get into some of these that took place, you can even see better deals. And one thing that's kind of interesting is if we go ahead and look at the upcoming auctions, we can see that, there's a number of different sales taking place. And then what they have is they have a couple of sales here at the very end called the reoffer auction, where they go ahead and drop the opening bid amount and offer them again. So any of these properties that don't sell, and we'll see a number that didn't sell, will go ahead and be put in this reoffer sale. And then the properties that don't sell in there, they have this no reserve auction where it goes ahead and starts at $100. So there's going to be some pretty good opportunities. In fact, the property that Tom talked about that we picked up, that commercial piece of land, was last year in this no reserve sale.
Yeah, in fact, what's nice about this is Michigan, the Michigan counties are smart, and what they do is they're able to kind of weed through their properties and change up pricing on them to make sure that they get sold. Because realistically, when we look at, there was a goat there. They took a picture of the goat.
Yeah, the goat. They have a pet goat.
Yeah, that is kind of funny here. Yeah, we can see all the information that we've got here with the Michigan properties here. They provide us with great information on the sales. We can also see exactly what property sold for. Yeah, we brought the property last year that was from this auction. But one thing that's nice, though, is that if a property has too high of an opening bid, or let's say there's just way too much owed in taxes on it, which we saw that with a bunch of sales just earlier in New York. We saw a bunch of properties there that had opening bids that were way too high for the property. Well, in Michigan, they end up fixing that themselves by holding their reoffer, trying to sell those properties again, which again, if they didn't get sold here in the first time, they get offered up again. But then if they don't get sold again, it's a sure sign that their minimum bid is too high. And so they lower that minimum bid down to just basically $100 to ensure that the property gets sold. And so if you don't get one of these properties in the first pass, or if you see a property that's pretty nice, but the opening bid is too high, if everybody else feels the same way, there's a good chance it'll end up in the reoffer auction or potentially in the no reserve.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So this property here ended up, it's on 10 acres. It ended up selling for 50 grand. It's valued about 180 to 200,000. I think Redfin had it at two. And these photos are a little bit older. I think they're about 10 years old. But we can get kind of an idea of it. So I mean, in this scenario, let's say they picked it up for 50 and they put an additional 50 into it. Now, based on the condition, based on the fact that somebody was still living in it at the time, I don't think it would need that. You can see it had a new roof at the time, new siding, new windows. But even in that scenario, you're still making 80 to 100 grand off of this property, even picking it up for 50 grand.
Well, and it looks like all the big stuff has already been done. And what that means is that you could do like a lipstick rehab on it and it would look amazing because it already has new siding, new windows, new roof. And so you could basically take the money you are investing in, just put it on the inside to make the inside look beautiful. And the end of that, it would be a really nice property.
Yeah, but I'll have to log into each one of these. Uh, this little property right here was kind of a little cabin property, but it's really kind of located in a pretty cool area. You can see it's right here on, this bay within the Great Lakes there. So you're talking about, less than a block from essentially the waterway and White Beach, all of those kind of things. So it's in a pretty cool little location. It ended up selling for
You can just go back. You don't have to log in again. Once you've logged in, it'll save it for a certain amount of time.
for some reason it's taken to me to another property though. Let me go back here real quick.
It's over 13,000.
Yeah, for 13,000. And it does need some work. When I looked up the ones that had been cleaned up, they were selling for more than that. But
It essentially has an assessed value of 80,000, and is valued closer to about 100,000, especially if you were to fix it up there. So for what they paid for it there, they paid very little for it.
yeah, and it's pretty tiny. Here's one that's even smaller than it. That's kind of similar. They're currently selling it for 160. So again, if we're looking at this property, let's say that we put in, you know, $40,000 into rehabbing it. Again, that's kind of like the deal that we showed you there with Tom, where yeah, it's going to take a little bit of work. This one will probably take less work, a lot less work than the one that we did there. But if you're into it to 30 grand, probably will sell between 140 to 160. It also has a garage there as well, which gives it additional benefit. Not a bad little property.
Yeah, well, and for 13,000, I mean, again, you're paying 13,000 for $100,000 property. You're paying about 13% of value. Tremendous deal.
Oh, that's irritating. For some reason, it's not letting me log in each time.
Oh, you know what? You can probably, I'll bet if you go and reload them after they come up, if you reload them,
Yeah,
maybe.
that's what I tried. That's what I thought too.
Oh, that's silly.
I might have to click on the links instead.
There
So
we
this
go.
little house, yes, sold for 26 grand. Kind of talk a little bit about it here. Let's see,
Yeah, the
located.
notes are always really good too on all these purchases. We can see it's valued at about 112,000 here.
Yeah, and kind of looking at the estimated between 107 to 130, they're missing a lot of information here. And sometimes when they do that, that actually docks the price down on Redfin. So of course, we're always going to check the current comps within the area before determining exactly what our high bid would be. But there's a lot of homes in here that sold between 10 to 30 grand that have the ability to make 50 to $100,000 profit on them.
Does this one have interior images too? It has a lot of photos. Maybe they're all exterior.
I think it might.
Oh no, they did get interior.
So, it's pretty dusty, pretty dirty, but, you know, it looks pretty dry for the most part. A lot of
Yeah.
cobwebs. I mean, in this kind of scenario, we're going to probably be getting a dumpster or two and taking out all the trash. But other
Oh,
than
it's
that,
perfect for a rehab though. For a
yeah.
cheap rehab, it's perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect for what we would call lipstick rehab. These aren't the kind of properties we're going to be putting in expensive type furnishings. We're going to be repainting it, putting in new carpet and, maybe adding some appliances and things like that. But otherwise, it's structurally sound, and that's kind of what we're looking for. In fact, willing to pay a little bit more for something that's structurally sound because we know we don't see, big, huge water spots or the roof, the ceiling falling down because of water damage or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, from what we can see on the inside, minus taking out this stuff that's there, that I'm doing basically like a dump run, you could clear the entire house out and it's all dry. It's you could use it as is, but what it means is that if we just replace the flooring, did some repainting on it, that the rest of the house is pretty much good. We maybe replace a few of the few things, maybe sinks and or possibly toilets, a few things like that. But it's not going to be a major rehab with this property because it's pretty much all there and it's all dry. And this would be you could turn around and flip this property because of how cheap they picked it up, but this would also be a good long-term rental.
One thing I just noticed, this is a joke, but this property comes with a ghost. See that orb? I
Yeah,
don't know if that's an orb or not.
I'll bet a lot of these properties probably come with ghosts.
So you've got a ghost to accompany the property as well. But you can see that it's been vacant. There's plenty of cobwebs and stuff like that. But overall, it's a sound little property that they were able to pick up for a good deal.
Yeah. Well, and it's a simple property, and what we're looking for more than anything with properties is a sign that the owner that lived in them, cared for the properties. The property was loved at some point, and that somebody was willing to invest time or effort into keeping the property up. That's a lot of times what we're looking for. And signs like anything that's left over from landscaping is a sign of somebody that's taking care of the property. If you're going to go through the process to take care of landscaping, generally things that go wrong with the house, you're also going to be taken care of.
Yeah, well, and some of these properties, maybe something like this, we're going to have a more difficult time, and I don't know, but let's just say we're having a more difficult time selling it or finding a rehab person within that area. I mean, it's right there on the water. You've got some beautiful parks within the area, and this is just this little trailer right here. But when we get into the condition is still in great shape, and the value of it, is about 100 grand or so. And so in this scenario, maybe we don't even rehab it at all. We just clean it up, we put a lock on it, and we go through quiet title and we sell it for 70 or 80 grand. We might not even worry about going through the rehab of it. But when you look at you can see the water right there, right behind, right across the street. Kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and yeah, this would be a great one just to basically rent out as it is. And with properties like this too, it's not hard to find long-term buyers. If, in other words, I wouldn't be surprised if the first tenants that come in to rent it want to buy the property, if they can long term. And that's something that you could work out with them. In fact, you could probably have the property collecting income or rent while you're taking it through a quiet title action, and while they're getting set up to be able to pay for the property, whatever the market pricing is that you're looking to sell it for. If you're going to sell it for 100,000, you could get all that stuff in place while you're renting it out to them.
Yeah, in fact, they had so many pictures, it took forever to get through them. It's got a nice little one-car garage there as well. But as you look at the interior of it, it's really in pretty good shape. In fact, I think we looked at this property before the auction. We saw that telescope and everything within there.
Oh yeah, I do recognize that telescope. Oh, and for 28,000, they've just paid very little for it. I mean, this is a property that's probably going to rent out for close to $1,000 a month. And again, you're just paying very little. It could be have itself paid off here in probably less than 3 years.
Yeah,
Um,
about 1,240. So
oh
between
yeah,
about $1,200 a month. But everything on it is really pretty clean and ready to go. I mean, even if you just put in, let's say, $5,000, you could probably sell it even just doing a quick, easy lipstick rehab on it because the paint's still good. I mean, look at the paint. The paint's still good, everything's still good. Just cleaning it out, fixing a few things on it, and getting it ready to sell, and really, and kind of improving it may be worth it in this particular location.
yeah. So they picked it up for about less than 30% of value. Is what they paid on it. A great deal. I mean, both in what they paid if they want to rent it out, if they want to turn around and flip it. The price point that they're at is awesome because it allows them to do either.
Yeah, this one here, they ended up paying a little bit more. It's got some pretty good benefits with it, 66,000. And, it's valued about 195,000, built in 1972. So it's not incredibly old. I mean, it's old, but it's not really, really old. And, a nice 3 bedroom, 1 bath. And again, if we were to go through all these photos, which would take some time, overall in pretty good shape, needs some things done to it, but cleaning it up, and you can see it's got, it's a pretty good size home with a basement there as well, and then a nice big garage.
Yeah, walkout basement. In fact, it looks like. Um,
Yeah, so picked it up again for what, 27 cents on the dollar, under 30 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, which is another great deal, and this is probably one that wouldn't take a whole lot of money invested into it, to get it resold. But yeah, they picked it up for a third of value, which is tremendous. Another one here, this one sold for 92,000,
Yeah, they
valued
ended
at
up,
232.
yeah, they ended up paying more than we would pay, and part of that has to do again with the condition of it. Somebody's looking at it thinking, well, it's not going to take a whole lot for us to rehab this property, and also looking there within the market value. So they paid, we would probably topped out about 70,000 on it. But again, there's still some $130,000 worth of profit. So even in this where they paid more than we would, even if they put $40,000 in rehab, they still have a chance to make $100,000. And so any of these deals, if you can make a good $100,000 off of doing a rehab and you can find, and do it fairly quickly, even paying even paying 90,000 for it, they're still getting it for so much cheaper than you could any other way. And you still have a chance to make $100,000. A lot of people, when they're buying a $230,000 house, they're hoping to make $20,000 or $30,000 flipping it because they paid 70 or 80 cents or even more than that for picking it up. And that's picking it up as a distressed property. But at tax sales, this sells for 40 cents on the dollar, 35 cents, 40 cents on the dollar, something like that. And even though this is more than we would have paid, there's still a chance to make $100,000 plus.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, well over $100,000 of potential profitability on it, and these are properties that just sold like in the last couple days. These are sales that are happening like right now. They've got more auctions that are occurring here this week, this coming week here, and will be clear through September. This is a nice house. I mean, look at the potential this house has. Holy cow, 341,000 picked up for 106. That was a home run. Somebody did awesome on that property. They're going to do so well on that.
Yeah, well, and you can kind of see, this was what, 6, 7 years ago, and you can kind of see the difference between it now and then, but it's just kind of dirtier. Everything else is the same, and as you're looking through, we can see where it was as of, you know, 6, 7 years ago, and still in good shape. People are still living within the property, and at least when the photos were taken, they may have moved out since that time. But we can see it's a good solid structure. It's got good size to it. And
It's crazy. The buyer has a legitimate chance to make $200,000 on this purchase.
yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah,
insane. That's a crazy for $100,000 purchase, to have that kind of potential, to have that kind of value. This is a nice property. How big is it? It's pretty big, 2,400 square feet. Um, yeah, it was picked up. I mean, the price wise, yeah, I'm surprised. That's a pretty low percentage of value to pay for a property with this kind of value in it. And it doesn't look like it would need that much in rehab. 30,000, 40,000 in rehab would probably do it. And if not, you've got lots of profitability to, do more, but you could probably get away with that. I mean, like, it was built in 92, so it's not that old of a property either. It was built after all the modern safety standards and building codes. And so, that you're not going to have to worry about it being overly old. The condition on it's decent. So 40,000 in rehab would probably take this property a long way and make it easy to get 350,000 out of it.
yeah. Well, you can see the home was completely redone in 2012. Now that's a while ago, but 2012 is a lot better than 1992. So meaning that it as far as things that matter, windows, those kind of things, those have all been redone. And again, it got pushed in 2018. So like Shade said, I mean, there is $250,000 worth of potential profit in it. And if they go ahead and spend 50 or 60 grand on rehabbing it, they're still making nearly 200,000. And overall, if you were to look through the photos, yeah, there's some stuff in the yard. There's an old Corvette. But either way, it's still completely a solid. Everything looks like, I mean, really a clean pressure washer and doing a few things to it could really make the whole outside look a lot better.
Oh yeah, I mean, just getting the outside of it cleaned up would clean it would fix the curb appeal and increase its value there. At least we know what somebody would be willing to pay. But if you put a little bit of money on the inside of the property as well, yeah, that property would be a rock star. It would do awesome, I'll bet.
Yeah, here's an example of just a lot that sold, and I mean, we could go through, hundreds of these between the auctions done, but sold for 3,200. It's got an SEV of 16,000. So what that means is we're going to double it as far as what they think the market value would be. So, 32,000 looks like there is some improvement on there. You've got power and water, utilities right there. So picking it up for 3,200, let's say it's worth, and Tom was talking about buying land for 10 cents on the dollar. This would be a good example. Picked it up for 3,200, maybe would go ahead and sell it as is for 15 or 16 grand, make 10 grand on it and sell it quickly.
It kind of looks like the place where they find a body. Yeah, I don't know that. Just thinking about that little whatever that cinder block thing is.
No, that's I think it's a
No,
pump house. I don't think that's where the serial killer was.
that's a clean house.
Yeah.
Picked up for 180.
Yeah,
And SEV of 119. So that means that the assessed value on the property is basically 240,000.
well, and look at the location on this as well. Right here close to this little St. Mary's Lake in a pretty nice area with some really nice homes within here.
Yeah, it's a very nice middle class neighborhood. When was that built? I didn't see that. In 67?
67.
Yeah.
Again, this was another one that they ended up paying higher than we would have paid for it. And I want to include a couple of them saying that, some homes are going to bid above our max bid. If that was never the case, then we would win every single property. And so as we're going through, we'll research it. Now, part of the reason is because of this area. A lot of the other homes have a lot higher value than that one does. And so I think that they're kind of looking there within the market and they figure based on the condition and the location of this home, if they can pick it up for less than 50 cents on the dollar, they're doing pretty good on it.
Yeah, well, they probably are. I mean, maybe it probably is one of the cheapest properties, in the neighborhood there at that price point. It also means, it would probably be a good candidate here for potential flip in a rehab here. Maybe we can get some more details here on it. Because I mean, certainly they paid a lot, but it's not like they're in any trouble of not being profitable. I mean, they probably still have the potential here to nearly double their money.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
For
Little homes,
33,000. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
pretty clean one.
Oh, I was looking at this property earlier. Forgot about that one. There's just commercial property sold for really cheap, 2,200.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Commercial lots, especially like commercial lots that are inside cities, we're always interested in because they have the potential for rental use. They have the potential for use that somebody may want to get under contract. So we're always interested in those. This house looks like a pretty good deal at 33,000. Its SEV of 44,000 means that it has an assessed value of about 90. If we were to look at the value here, I'm not sure where it would stand at for probably over 100,000 here. So where they're into it, or the point they're at, isn't very high. They haven't paid too much for it, probably less than a third of value.
yeah, and it's here within Battle Creek, so we're in a good sized city as far as small cities concerned. So we're going to be able to find contractors within the area. It looks like it's at the time was currently still being lived in, uh, and valued at about 130,000. So again, let's say that they're into it. They put another $30,000. Now I think this would be a $10,000 to $20,000 lipstick rehab, clean it up, sell it quick. But let's say that they even put 30 into it. Well, they still have the chance to make, they're into it 60, they could still make, what is that, $70,000?
Hmm.
70, $80,000 off of rehabbing if they were to go ahead and put $20,000 or $30,000 into it.
Yeah, a tremendous amount of value. And they bought it cheap enough that if they wanted to, they could probably just turn around and sell it as is without doing anything. But the reason why they'd pursue a rehab is because it would help them increase their overall profitability. That's a good deal for 16,000. That looks like a nice little house.
Yeah, yeah, not too bad. It looks like there's a few trouble issues, but overall looks decent. This little shed or garage is probably going to need some work, but picked up for 16 grand.
It's interesting they don't have an SCV on it.
Yeah, I kind of found that interesting as well. You can see it had value about 94 grand or so.
Yeah, picked up for very little. I mean, they basically have probably paid about 15, 16% of value for this property, which is fairly close to being usable right now. Oh, that's interesting too. That's a commercial professional like office center there for units 1, 3, and 6.
Yeah, there's five tax parcels being sold it as a single auction. Commercial land cone. This is for 5 out of 6 condominium office located in a large commercial building.
Oh yeah, it's everything except for unit 2. So it's units 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, essentially, you're purchasing all now. It's been boarded up. That was probably to, help protect the property, and you definitely need to look into this. But with something like this is where we can get so much information from the the city about what's going on, what's been done. Looks like there was, some type of
Urgent
school or
care.
something, urgent care, family practice. We could look and see when this was last in business. And, obviously this is a huge type project, but there is these kind of commercial properties out there for investors that are interested where, to rebuild something like this would cost a huge amount of money. Now, if you could turn those into rental properties, take those suites and turn them into condos. Is that something that's possible? Well, you could find out from the city, or creating different suites for different offices. You might be able to, I think if they're individual condos, after you went ahead and got it rehabbed and got it going, you could probably sell those condos as well, individually versus even renting them out.
Yeah, I mean the assessed value on the property is like 500,000 roughly, from the county. And the the replacement value on the property is probably over $1 million. Probably well over $1 million. I don't think you could replace that for much less than that. And so, yeah, it is kind of interesting. It's an interesting property. It would be interesting to get a look inside. It's a lot of square footage there, though, that's not currently being used.
Yeah, in fact, let's do something real quick.
The location looks pretty good too.
We'll do this as Tom gets ready to come back in, so you can see that there's, a Dodge dealership right here. Here's Chick-fil-A, Domino's, Burger King, IHOP, hotel right there, Harbor Freight.
Yeah,
You
there's
know,
no reason that shouldn't be getting used.
yeah, I mean you're right there, kind of within town. I wonder what would happen all in here.
And there's no street side images. Oh, there is. There's a street side image. Oh yeah, that's nice looking. The building looks decent too, even in those images. What year are the images from?
This is from 2023. And, even at that time, like, I don't know when this building was built, but my guess would be in the 70s. We could go ahead and look at the county record and it might say here when it was built as well.
It looks like a 70s property.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Well, they didn't pay too much for it, it looks like.
No, they end up paying 88,000 for it.
Oh, it's a pipe burst with internal damage. Oh, interesting. He's read into the comments here on it. It has a pipe burst with internal damage that costs $200,000, which is why it probably ended up in this situation.
Yeah.
An owner or somebody probably couldn't afford to deal with some of the maintenance.
Well, and whoever bought it, you hope and you would assume that they have some type of plan. But in something like this, we can look up from the city. I mean, they were able to pull this information, but we could find out all of the details by contacting the city, finding out more about it. And, when any of these kind of commercial properties, we can also look up the address. And usually with businesses, there's going to be a lot more information available than just a single family home on when that commercial property was last occupied, who rented it, who was using it. And so that helps us do more due diligence on these commercial properties to make sure that we're making a good investment.
Yeah, nice. Nice. Well, cool. We'll turn it over to you for a bit here, Tom, to wrap things up.
Definitely. Well, I think as far as, I did see one question. Someone asked what SEV means in
Oh,
the Q&A
it's
section.
state equalized value. It's a term that we see mostly with Michigan, though. And it's just basically how they go about their assessed. It's their way to say assessed. And we know it's roughly 50% of assessed. We have to double it. Yeah, that's basically what it means. So it's particular to Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I did put the link one more time in the chat for those of you guys that want to sit down and have a one-on-one meeting and really figure out what your individual plan of action should be and what you guys should be doing this next, this next 12 months. Because even though there's only a quarter left on the year, there's a whole nother, you got to start planning and taking action because all of this information, Stephen Shea just went over some amazing stuff, showed you all kinds of opportunities that are out there. But if you don't ever take action on it, it's just a nice thought, right? It's just watching other people do things without us doing it. So I definitely hope everybody on here is out there doing, not just learning, and really getting out there, making some things happen. I did see a question. What was the county you guys were looking at again in Michigan?
Oh, it was Lenawee. Lenawee was the county that didn't do their sale on tax-sale.info. They did it on I think it was maybe an on-site auction, or I don't know if it was online. I would have to look here again, but it was Lenawee County though.
It's
Oh, it
always
was on
funny to me
Zeus.
how
Each
county wants it. Like different counties, they all try to like act like they're individuals. You know what I mean? Rather than just go with the flow on stuff. Like in Florida, I feel like every other county, it's a different auction site.
Yeah, very interesting. But good question. You guys have had awesome questions here. We've appreciated those, and feel free to ask any more if you want. We'll be sure to answer them here before the end.
Yeah, I mean this last few minutes, you guys, that's really what this is for, is to to give you the opportunity to really ask the questions that you guys want to ask, anything and everything. What your exit strategies for should be. Maybe next time I come on one of these, I'll spend more time just focused on wholesaling, and the different attributes and aspects of that, and well, I see a question. How do you find a heat map on a property? You have to create heat maps. You can't really find them, and that's a whole different conversation. We're talking about, how we create heat maps and determine the right areas of the cities to dump into. But that's a big, we actually create our heat maps. So it's not like you're just going to be able to search out how do I find a heat map on Google. You actually, it's a process of taking the sold comps along with the tax auction properties, uploading them into, software use that sits on top of Google Maps and really gives us a good idea of what's going on in that market.
Yeah, in fact,
Um,
it's something that we teach within the membership as we have a whole training. In fact, I think we did it for the members maybe a month or so ago, where we essentially like Tom talked about, we download that information and we're able to upload information like Redfin data where we can really hone in on those particular markets. And so if we're just researching a couple of homes within a certain city or area, we may not create a heat map for that particular, property if we're only looking at one or two. But if we have multiple properties, for example, when we were bidding there in Arkansas, where we have many properties that we picked up, we created heat maps within those areas because we were going to bid on multiple properties to see which are going to be the hottest areas. Which ones are we going to go after? In fact, there's a question here that's coming in through some of our social media about how do we set our max bids. And that's something that we really talk about in the 3 stages of due diligence, but they're within that 3rd stage.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, and setting max bids is actually an area where people make a lot of mistakes with tax sales specifically because they're paying more than they should. We tend to set our bid to value ratios here as a percentage of value. And we generally don't pay much more than 30% on most tax sale properties. If something's real special, maybe we'd pay a little bit more than that. But we usually try to keep those percentages, way down because again, we're coming in as kind of a wholesaler in most of these cases, and so we're trying to buy in that position. So the lower we pay, the easier it is for us to sell the property, even if we're going to sell it at a discount. We also had Dan mentioned something really helpful. He said Perplexity and Claude are a big help with this, and I think he's onto a really good point here. We've been talking about AI a little bit and some of the ways that it can help us. But there are so many tools that are out there, and I think that there are more ways that can help us than we even realize. Just because you have to explore it more and figure out ways, to utilize it. But once you utilize some of these systems, it's amazing what AI can do.
Yeah, in
yeah,
fact,
my concern with just kind of throwing AI out there though is that you have to be really good at asking the right questions. Because one thing I do notice, like I've been doing some things, I found it wrong in a lot of the cases, even doing research, unless you're asking, narrowing down the questions. There's a ton of, there's a ton of, I mean, you can get an idea of like a city data if you want a quick overview by going to like bestplaces.net and research about any city in the county, get an idea of incomes, populations, the real estate market. But I would just say that's the one thing I would caution is that I found, in something Jerome and I have been hacking on the AI side, is that you got to be careful that it can be because sometimes it's only pulling sources. I kind of hoped AI was going to pull from like the whole internet, you know what I mean? But it'll
Yeah,
be like
yeah.
citing like 3 sources or 4 sources. I'm like, what are you doing?
uh,
You know what I mean?
you know,
That's a Google search.
what's kind of interesting for us is that we've been using AI lately for help with things like letters or listings, of creating our listing itself and for creating neighbor letters and other things like that. And yeah, we found it can't access certain information. Like for instance, the AI isn't allowed to access the county records. But it could read images that we show. So if we took screenshots of the county records, though, it could read that information to verify things for us. But yeah, I mean, not everything is exact there with it because it does have, it can't access certain things here. But yeah, we found it really very helpful for writing things like letters and stuff. But I don't know if I would trust it on numbers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, exactly like Shade said, with as far as the data, we're still got to verify everything, especially when it comes to that. But as far as writing up letters, a lot of us have a hard time, or especially if you haven't done it before, how do I write up a good listing? And that's really where it can benefit. In fact, that's kind of something we were going through and doing with our students is we were just putting down certain details. We created some different prompts that are available within the form section of the website, but where you can put in those details. So here's one that we wrote up for a neighbor letter. So we took the script that we had and we included that information, and it did it in a nice, good format that we can use to go ahead and post or to send pre-foreclosure letters or to put up listings. And so that's where it can really be beneficial is helping you draft those letters and draft those advertisements so that you can turn around and sell and market your property.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
And do you guys see this other question up in the Q&A section? It says, how difficult is it, Jessica asks, how difficult is it to find deals through land bank sites? She's noticed with some, the application requires proposals for how you plan to improve the property. So you can't just simply buy, a lot of those things though, Jessica, it really just comes down to what systems. I can do an application with what we plan to improve a property in about 5 minutes because we use with our fix and flip software, we can plug a few things in and already spit out a total rehab budget for us. And so some of that stuff doesn't take as much time. Um, what else?
Well,
What
one
What
thing
do
to
you guys
mention
think
is
about buying through land banks?
one thing to mention is as well is that all land banks are different. So we were, I think on the podcast last week we actually did a live land bank review, and we found land banks, that you could acquire land for 10 cents on the dollar. There's other land banks that they're going to have you fill out and do an application like that. And there are other land banks that are going to have some requirement. What they don't want you to do is to buy the property and then not do anything with it. So, they may have you make certain improvements that need to be done over a certain, let's say a 2-year period. And some are going to require, a full plan and rehab within that time frame. So no land bank is created equally. We've got to check the rules for that specific land bank that'll give us an idea of what can be done. But there's investors every single day that are flipping property and doing rehabs from an investor standpoint through the land bank. So there is good opportunity, but they're not all created equal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
some land banks are up in the night. I mean, just straight up like they are not reasonable, and some of them are just like normal. They actually want to sell property, but there are some of them out there that seem like they don't want to sell anything.
or they only want to sell to like people that are buying a property for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is those contingencies. Some of them have a 3 or 6 month waiting before you can buy as an investor. But we did just I got a property under contract from a land bank that we're deciding whether to take on. It's that easily could would be oh, what was it? It was like a 60 unit retirement home. It's under contract. I don't know if we're trying to decide whether to keep it or not, but we're able to put it under contract with like pretty much nothing down for like $350,000. But it needs a lot of work. $2 million, but it'd be a 60 unit assisted living facility, so you could turn it into.
Whoa.
So, there are deals like that on there. That's a $1 million property as is, but you definitely have to look for the right deals.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we were surprised a few years ago when we went out to our buying tour. Shade was out there, and they went to go look at some on-market deals because this land bank had listed them through a realtor. And it wasn't until they looked at the contract and realized that this off-market deal or on market deal, excuse me, was essentially a land bank property, but the numbers worked out where there's still good profitability. And one thing about the land banks is a lot of them you'll get a better, cleaner title than you would if you were just buying it through a tax deed auction.
Yeah, that's actually, yeah, that's true. That we've noticed that lots of land banks are going through efforts to clear the title of issues here before they sell. It's kind of like an additional service, an additional benefit they're able to offer from buying through them. Is you don't have to deal with straight up tax deed title. In fact, in some cases, there are some land banks that will handle the quiet title stuff for you.
Yeah.
Well, were you saying, Stephen, that there's even some of the auctions are starting in Georgia are recognizing potentially after they go through the judicial foreclosure, them as like a clean title warranty deed.
Yeah, well, that's what they said as far as Georgia has changed their law, and it's interesting, and that's one thing that is an advantage of being part of the membership or following us, is that we're trying to always look at some of those law changes. And so one thing that's happened within Georgia as it's gone is that some of the counties are doing what's called a judicial foreclosure. So for the non-judicial foreclosure, those are going to have the 1 year redemption period like Georgia's always had. But these properties that they're taking through the judicial foreclosure only have a 60-day redemption period. And in addition to that, like Tom talked about, and this is we're reading this off their website. So I haven't talked to an attorney about this, at least a Georgia attorney to know, but they say it eliminates the need to go through quiet title. So it sounds like whatever judicial foreclosure that they're doing there within Georgia is pretty much cleaning up those titles enough that you can either get a warranty deed or be able to get title insurance on it without going through quiet title.
Yeah, well, and as long as it's insurable, that's all we can, that's all we need. As long as it's insurable for title insurance, we're good to go.
It's interesting to watch. I feel like that more states are changing. I remember when Arkansas had a 2 month redemption period or whatever. Now
Yeah.
it's 2 days, and it was still kind of a redemption state. Now it's pretty much a tax deed state. We're watching
Hmm.
like Colorado change from liens to liens and deeds, and it'll be interesting
Yeah.
to see how. And now Georgia, it's like, but I'm hoping that Georgia sparks if they do this judicial foreclosure thing and do the clean title, they'll start making the other states think about some of that too. Because
Yeah.
I mean, by all intents and purposes, it should be a warranty deed, just like a
Yeah.
mortgage foreclosure.
Yeah, yeah, it really should. It shouldn't be such a clouded title after the foreclosure like that. But there are actually, what is nice though is that it does seem like counties are recognizing that and kind of working in that direction. Certainly much more so than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and you can always work out deals. Like I know the Arkansas properties, they're doing clearing the title on all of them, and we were able to get it done for quite a bit cheaper per per one because we're doing several at a time. But still, that'll be interesting to see. It's just interesting to see what's going to keep changing. Because I
Yeah.
see more and more states. It seems like more states are going to deeds slowly than just liens.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are seeing the need for deeds at some point in their process. Even if they have liens, there's a need to have, a deed process where a foreclosure can take place, where properties can be issued to new owners, where they can kind of, they can get the process completed. Because liens themselves work to a degree, but ultimately, if you don't pay the taxes, eventually they're going to turn into deed everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I know we're getting kind of down. We're already past the hour. Is there any final questions out there, you guys, that you want to ask before we start wrapping things up? I'm glad we were able to get, I guess we are live streaming, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah, first time,
But
nice.
Yeah, we
yeah,
apologize about the beginning, but I think we figured it out now. So, yeah, the podcast and maybe some of these other trainings here in the future, but definitely the podcast each week we're going to be live streaming. So you can go ahead and join us here live on Zoom, but you can also catch us on our Facebook and YouTube channels.
Yeah, you bet. We're looking forward to doing this in the future.
awesome. Well, guys, let's give it up to Stephen Shade and everything on here today. and really appreciate you guys all coming out and being a part of this. And definitely, book some time if you need it. Get those things done, and we'll see y'all again here soon. I'm
Yeah,
Yeah, you
either
bet.
some of my trainings or Steve and Shade on their trainings. It's fun when we kind of get to do some of them together like today.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys have been an awesome group today. We really appreciate all the great questions and participation. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up unless there's anything else you guys want to cover.
No, I think we're good. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
All
We
right.
will see
Thanks,
you later.
guys.